Okay, so let's get started. Good evening, everybody, and the audience that is here at MSU in the Broad Business College here at MSU. So it's a pleasure for me. My name is Leo Zulu. I'm the interim director of the Center for the African Studies Center here at Michigan State, and on behalf of the Broad College and the African Studies Center. It's a pleasure to invite you to our event today. So what we have today is a panel discussion on a very important topic, doing business in Africa. So there are lots of exciting things happening on the African continent, lots of opportunities in terms of business. And there are also very energetic young people that are doing these things, startups, so the things that are happening. And then business, of course, is the key engine for economic development on the African continent. So it was a pleasure with our colleagues here at CIBER, the International Business Center here at MSU, last spring, when they had a lunch and they invited our international studies and program people, different centers that do global work and international work, to see how we can work together here on campus to let the programs that are happening here at the excellent programs here in the Broad College, how they can link up internationally. So then the people know, and then the resources that are here are also potentially accessible to different parts of the world. So that started last semester, and already here in the fourth semester, we are making it happen. So this is very exciting for us at the center, and I'm sure at Broad. So without saying any more, I just wanted to give a little background. Welcome to this panel. We have an excellent panel here today, and I'll pass it on to Professor Johnson to introduce from CIBER.
Good afternoon. My name is Marilyn Johnson. I chair the accounting department here at the Broad College. And I should start out by telling you, I am not here moderating the panel tonight as an expert. This is a topic about which I don't know very much. I am here as a learner, and having had the opportunity to speak with our panelists this morning, I know that there is much that we're all going to learn from the gifted and knowledgeable people who are here tonight. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists to you. First of all, on the end is Dr. Leonidas Murembya. Dr. Leo, as he is known, is an assistant professor in the Department of Economics here. His specialty is international development work, and so he's going to be able to provide us a broad economic framework on the landscape in Africa. Joining us from Accra, Ghana, is Dr. Patrick Lukulay. Dr. Lukulay, marvelous. Dr. Lukulay is president of Tech for Health, and he is going to be able to bring to us tonight the perspective of a successful businessman. Next to Dr. Leo is Dr. Anastacia Mamabolo, and she joins us. She's an associate professor at the Gordon Institute at the University of Pretoria. She is here this year as a visiting researcher. Her area of expertise and the focus of her research is entrepreneurship. So she's ideally suited to talk to us about small and medium businesses and some of the challenges faced by entrepreneurs in Africa. Finally, next to Anna is Mr. Pius Mithika. Pius is a student here at MSU. He is working on a MS in finance. He also has an undergraduate degree in finance from MSU. And last year worked in investment banking in New York City. So one of the challenges faced by any business is financing. So Mr. Mithika is going to be ideally suited to talk to us about the financing challenges that are unique to the African landscape. Okay, so with that in the way of introductions, I thought we'd open tonight by talking in general about the opportunities that exist for doing business in Africa. Leo, would you be willing to open our discussion?
Sure.
So I don't know, Leo, it might be better if you move to this, to speak, if you move to this seat here.
Okay.
I'm going to come.
Okay.
This looks to have the biggest, the closest to.
Okay. I can do that. One of the classes that I teach is the economics of sub-Saharan Africa. And I try to show an overview of the development of sub-Saharan Africa. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in North Africa, so maybe we should have had somebody from North Africa to talk about North Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has had a lot of transformation since independence, from an economy based on just one commodity export to a diversified, today a diversified economy with many people trying to start businesses, economies trying to reinvent themselves. And so there are many opportunities of businesses there. In the new millennium, African countries have been, many of them have been the fastest growing in double digits. We know that African population, the youngest population in the world. So in terms of market size as a business, you have a growing population that you can serve. The population of Africa not only is young, but it's projected to continue to be youngest in the next 60 years, while in other parts of the world, the population is declining. Having said that, as a businessman, of course, a business person, you're also worried about the income of the people, the spending. Are they going to be able to spend on new product or service? And the fact is, African countries are among the poorest countries. We know that. So as a business person, you need to go in thinking about that, how you can make an impact, how you can actually create those incomes among the people for your product. So we're going to talk about all those challenges later on. So I just wanted to start off by saying that Africa is offering several opportunities because it's growing economically, it's growing in terms of population, and it's putting a lot of funds in developing infrastructure, in educating people, and so I guess I will stop from there and let my colleagues go forward.
I want to make sure that we give Dr. Lukulay an opportunity to participate. Dr. Lukulay, would you like to make any comments about opportunities for doing business in Africa?
Yes, thank you so much. I am really sorry I could not be there in person on campus. I haven't visited MSU in a long time. The last time I was there, I think I was launching my book, which I wrote a few years ago. Was well received on campus, and I really look forward to the next opportunity to visit. But nonetheless, thanks for inviting me to this African, you call it the Africa Tea Time. Really nice opportunity to connect and to get perspectives from folks that may have experience running or developing business in Africa. So yes, I agree with everything that Pius has said. Africa is an exciting continent. I remember returning home about maybe 5 years now, having worked in major pharma companies in the US, including Pfizer and others, and I wasn't sure that I was going to survive for even a week. But since I've been here, I've been just overwhelmed with the opportunities that are present around. It's a virgin land, I would say. There are many businesses that are already established in the West that are not yet here. And so you really, one really has an open terrain to bring those ideas and to have a great business landscape on the continent. One of the key drivers for that is that the economy is growing, the middle class is growing, so people can afford valuable services and valuable goods, unlike several years back. And also, you have the desire and the drive to have made in Africa products. This is something, when I was growing up in Sierra Leone, we wanted everything from abroad, but the mindset and the psyche has changed. People really now desire to have made in Africa products. And so that also is driving the growth of businesses that one can set up on the continent. So thank you very much. I'll stop there for now.
Any other comments on this topic?
Thank you so much. It is absolutely a pleasure and an honor to be here today and talk about Africa, our beloved continent. So adding on to what my colleagues have already said, I do agree that the population is quite youthful, and when you think about youth, you think about entrepreneurial activities that are quite exciting. And what we're seeing on the continent is the rise in entrepreneurship, where entrepreneurs are no longer, looking for jobs, but they're appreciating entrepreneurship as a career of choice. And that forces them to think about unique ideas and opportunities. I mean, Dr. Patrick spoke about made at home, made in South Africa, partly South African. So we see a lot of designers. So today I put on a dress that was made at home, just to show that manufacturing is one of the industries that is booming in Africa, where you see designers come up with unique designs. In Nigeria, they talk about Ankara clothes or Ankara attires that they would put on, and a lot of people, they buy those items. And agribusiness is one of the areas where youth are now changing their perceptions about agriculture. Back in the days, we used to think that agriculture was for our parents, but these days, a lot of young people are starting agribusinesses, and not only stopping there, but also exploiting the entire value chain. That if I have cabbage, I need to make sure that there are value-added products that I can make out of cabbage, out of whatever that comes out of the farm. And the same applies with manufacturing, that, a lot of times we would take products outside of the country, but not look at the value and how can we, take this cotton that we produce and come up with a beautiful dress like this. So I think the opportunity is exploring the entire value chain, and we've seen exporting, which is absolutely exciting. There are markets that are interested in African products. Green energy is another booming business that a lot of entrepreneurs are starting to embark on, and I know that we're going to talk about challenges. So this comes, being inspired by, power challenges or electricity challenges in our continent, but the renewable energy options, that young people are trying to innovate around are quite exciting. And the education space is also another business that is coming up quite strongly, where we're finding alternative ways of learning. Back in the days, in Africa, because of infrastructure challenges, you would study under the tree. But now young people have been innovative to come up with, education solutions. And lastly, the social enterprises that are really centered around, the challenges that a lot of ordinary Africans are experiencing. So we're seeing a rise of social enterprises that are not only dependent on donations, but that are able to make profit and reinvest the profit into the business for social impact. So we're seeing that emerge a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, so great points there. Maybe all I can do is just sum it up. So it's simply what we are trying to put across is that we're talking about roughly 1.4 billion, which is like 17% of the world population here. So this is a population where people have needs that need to be satisfied. We're talking about a population of 1.4 where there is the fastest growing of the middle class growing in the world as we speak or as of now. In the next 5 to 7 years, the expectation is that the consumption in Africa is going to grow up to 1.7 billion. So if you look at these numbers, you realize that there is a different aspect of businesses that these people will of course need in terms of services, in terms of manufacturing, and because we're looking at a continent where I think most of the other countries, looking at the US, looking at the UK, they've done pretty much of their industrialization, and now Africa is just coming up. So we have a lot of young people moving into cities. The other day I was reading an article saying that by 2030, Africa is going to be one of the most growing continents in terms of urbanization. So when these people are coming to the city, they need services, they need the housing. And when you look at all these things, you realize these are business opportunities that people are coming and try to solve some of these problems.
Thank you very much. At listening to all 4 panelists, I've been really taken by the tremendous opportunities that exist in Africa as a result of the economic growth and the entrepreneurial spirit throughout the continent. Often, however, it's true that with great opportunities come great challenges. So why don't we move to talk a little bit about the challenges that arise when doing business in Africa? Dr. Lukulay, would you be willing to open that discussion about challenges of doing business in Africa? No one better to speak than a businessman, I think, about challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be happy to do that. So not to temper the enthusiasm about doing business in Africa, like any other activity, one has to have a balanced view of things. So as much as it's exciting to open up businesses in Africa, there are also some challenges that one needs to be aware of. And these are not to discourage business, but to make you aware and know that they exist so that you can mitigate the problems and allow you to thrive as a good business. So I'm going to speak from experience in setting up my consultancy firm in Ghana, supporting African pharmaceutical companies to raise their standard of manufacture of medicines and make them more competitive so that they can sell their products outside of Africa into Europe and the US. So I'll speak about 3 pillars of challenges. The first pillar is the human resource capital challenge. You will find out that there are unskilled labor force in certain areas of businesses, like in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Africa is just now really getting up to speed on new technologies that are used for manufacture of medicines, which is the area I'm most familiar with. And so you have to be prepared to undergo or to implement rigorous training programs to bring the young ones up to speed so that they'll adopt new technologies to do manufacturing. So unskilled labor is something that one has to be vividly aware of and know that it exists and have sufficient budget for training and constant refresher training. The other area is on the market itself. The market is highly unregulated, unlike markets in developed countries where you have strong regulation about the quality of products that are allowed on those markets. The African market is a little bit poorly unregulated, meaning that there are no stringent requirements to have various types of goods on the market. So you may have products that are not of good quality competing with a business that is making very good quality products. And as you know, quality comes with price. The market is also very price conscious. So quality is less of a focus than price. So be aware that as you make goods, as much as you focus on quality, you have to be mindful that the price has to be right, because people pay a lot of attention to affordability. Can I afford this product? And even though it may be the best quality product, if the price regime is not quite there, you might find it difficult for people to patronize your business. And then the third pillar is on data. Now, as you establish a business, you often do your research to understand the market, and so you gather data about your business or competition or competitors. Always gather data from multiple sources, because quality of data can be an issue. If you spring to action based on one set of data that you may have collected, you may actually go in the wrong direction. And this happened to me in a way. And so I had to quickly learn that it's very important to compare information that you get from one source with another, because we're not very data conscious. People estimate everything. They say, yeah, it's about this. It's roughly this, and it could be way off. So really be careful about understanding what basis are you making decisions, and the data that you collect. You have to be very mindful and try and compare multiple sources of data. So otherwise, the opportunities are there, and you just have to be mindful that these challenges exist, and you come prepared to try to mitigate them or implement programs in your organization that you make sure that these challenges are handled or are well kept on the forefront for your business to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mithika, I know financing is a challenge for any young business.
Yeah, and actually before I jump in financing, I would like to talk about the foundations of every business, especially in the current environment, is infrastructure and technology. So of course, I wouldn't say Africa will have the best technology. I wouldn't say we have the best infrastructure, but I can say we are getting there. So because there's a lot of investment in trying to bridge the infrastructure gap in the African continent. As we speak, currently Africa is spending around I think $80 billion per year, which is a double of what they were spending previously in terms of trying to bridge the infrastructure gap, making sure we have things like roads, electricity or power, and the same comes to technology as well. I mean, one thing I like about Africa, and speaking, from a Kenyan perspective where I come from, is that we have had our own ways of, developing technology in a way that it's suited for the African continent. And a good example is looking at the challenge of things like banks. To realize some countries in Africa, I mean, Kenya might be not a good example because there were several banks there, but there are other smaller countries like Rwanda, I think you mentioned before, where they have like 2 big banks. So you realize that this being a challenge where people, if you don't have good roads, they can't access, banking facilities because they need to go to a branch to access the banking services. And then you realize, oh, so this is an opportunity. If we can't get, enough funding to develop these infrastructures to bring investors to invest in banks, then how can we solve this problem using technology? And that's how we came up with the mobile banking. As I speak today, in Kenya, I would say 60% of Kenyans use mobile banking. So we're talking about ease of payment. So if you want to do a transaction, I don't have to go to a bank to deposit some cash. I don't have to go to have a credit card to pay. Actually, I came to learn about credit cards when I came to the US for the first time. Yet I used to transact when I was at home. So today here in the US, if I want to send someone money, I need to do either a sale. I need to use Venmo, I need to use Cash App. And those platforms need internet, right? And then you come to realize, oh, Africans realize we might not be well equipped in terms of internet. We might not be well equipped in terms of mobile phones. And how can we make our own technology more efficient or serve our own needs? And some of the mobile banking platforms we're talking about here, like M-Pesa, you don't actually need internet to access it. So which means no matter where you are in Kenya, you don't need like Wi-Fi data. As long as there's access over a network, you can make transactions. And this has made it possible for businesses to transact, move cash around, and also ease the availability of some of these household credit. Because now, if you save using M-Pesa, that means you're also able to borrow some cash from M-Pesa. So in terms of infrastructure and technology, there are challenges, but I can say people have found their own way of bridging these gaps, and people are getting there. And also that means there's also business opportunities for outsiders as well to come and see how we can take these not as challenges, but as opportunities to do business. Now, the biggest challenge that I think most people have not been able to come around is the challenge of financing. And we are talking about a country that is so young. Take Africa, like, as a startup. So when a startup is starting up, usually you don't have money. So there has to be a source that comes to finance all these projects. And talking of a banking system that is not well developed, now you can imagine how tough it becomes to get access to things like the traditional commercial loans. And again, I don't know any African country that has a way of an efficient way of assessing someone's or a business's credit worthiness like we have in the US. Today, if I want to go and access and apply for a credit in the US, it's very easy. You just need to get my social security number and check my credit score. And if I have a good credit score, then you can give me a loan or financing. I don't think we have such a system that accesses, people's credit worthiness. And what this has done is that there's put pressure in banks to charge very high, interest rates, because it's very expensive. If I don't know your credit worthiness, then I need a very, higher premium to give you cash than I would really need if I knew, how you are in terms of your credit. So that is a challenge when we are talking about the normal banking system. Then we come to the other side where not every business relies on these traditional banking system. There are people that rely, especially in developed countries, that people, that businesses, the startups, that rely on the public state of market. And this actually is also a very big challenge in the African continent. I'm talking about a continent that has roughly 28 stock markets. But then outside of South Africa, all these other markets are liquid. So a very good example is Kenya. I don't think Kenya has had an IPO, which is initial public offering, since 2015. So what does that tell you? It tells you if you channel some cash in a business, started it with the hope of going public one day, then it means unless you go public in South Africa and you operate in Kenya. So that tells you there's a challenge, there's a gap. And it's not just Kenya, it's a gap across the 28 stock markets, which is again a challenge, because if you have a country of 50, if you have a continent of 54 countries, and then you have only 28 financial markets, you're leaving a very big gap in terms of flow of the financial economy here. So I could point a few challenges that probably have led to the slowdown of some of these financial markets. And again, one of them would be probably the lower saving culture of the African continent. And I think people have been, again, trying to embrace a saving culture, but especially as, you know, these mobile banking platforms come up and try to bridge the gap with the banking system. So a lot of people have been banking their cash, because you're talking about 17% of Africa's GDP. And when you're coming down to smaller countries like Kenya is doing, I think, 13%. There's some countries that are doing really great. Countries like Rwanda is doing like 20%. I mean, Tanzania doing like 20% of their GDP, which is in par with the US, because I think US is at 20% of their GDP. But again, you're talking 20% of, you know, of 20%. Let's say, for example, Africa 17% of an apple, in US 17% of probably pumpkin. So you can't compare these two numbers, but it's progress. So this has contributed into the financial market being very liquid, because again, you don't want to bring your company public and then you don't have, you know, the supply of cash or people coming in to trade and such things. And yeah, another thing I wanted to mention, for example, a very good example again, so to kind of reiterate, it's not like there is not really money or that to trade, it's just that we don't have these, you know, liquid financial markets. A good example is the African pension funds. So when I was doing my research, I realized that there is like $600 billion US sitting in the pension funds in Africa. This money, if you came to the US, this is money that will be flowing in the financial markets. But in Africa, it's the opposite. This is money either invested in real estate or money invested in government securities, because again, how would you invest in a stock market that you know is going to be very liquid? Nairobi Stock Exchange, for example, has 63 countries listed. Out of those 63 countries listed, they have a total of I think roughly 17 billion of capital. Out of that, 50% is controlled by one company, which is Safaricom. So in such a case, you realize Safaricom controlling half of that finances, and then the other half is shared among the rest of the companies, 62 companies. Then you realize it's a very liquid market. And this becomes a challenge for all those other businesses wanting to come in, either to issue bonds to finance their projects, or maybe issue equity to finance their projects. And again, if you don't have the public markets, again, we go back to pushing pressure on the private market, which is the traditional commercial bank, pushing the interest rates to be high. Yeah. And sorry for taking forever to explain that.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment about some of the challenges of doing business in Africa?
So there are two things that I wanted to talk about a little bit that are positive that maybe I forgot to mention. Is Pius just mentioned it a little bit, is the use of technology. The penetration rate of cellular phones is comparable to developed countries today in Africa. Almost everyone has a cell phone, and so it's a positive thing if you're doing business. The other thing that I've learned is the governments are aware that the development of Africa is to be based on its own treatment. And so there's a lot of funds that are being invested in creating business incubators that help, in terms of training and, just giving skills in running a business to different people. So those are two things that I wanted to say that are positive. So in terms of challenges, Patrick mentioned the lack of skills. One of the other things that Marilyn did not mention is I wear another hat where I'm an economist for the state of Michigan, where I actually provide economic information to workforce developers and economic developers for Michigan. And when you're dealing with young people, soft skills become a problem. I just worked with a few colleagues here at Michigan State on a report for the International Coffee Organization, where we're looking at what can be done to increase the participation of young people in the coffee value chain. And one of the challenges that was mentioned by people around the world, and particularly one lady in Uganda who has a coffee shop that targets the local consumption. She was just fed up of coffee being produced to export to Western countries. And so she decided, I'm going to start a business that target coffee for Africans. And one of the things that she realized was, since the population is 60% below 24 years old, you need to actually utilize young people to do your business. And one is being young and inexperienced, you have those problems of soft skills, which even here in the United States, we are having up in here in Michigan, we have those problems with young people, that being able to communicate with, in business, you have to communicate. But in Africa, it gets even compounded by the culture itself. Children are not encouraged to outspeak. You have to, if you're in front of adults, you have to be quiet unless somebody asks you to speak, right? And so that compounds with the whole inexperience of being a young person. And in a continent where you have 60% below 25 years old, then you have a problem with soft skills. And if you're going to do business there, you need to know that it exists, and you need to be prepared either to use government programs that are trying to deal with that issue, or to train your workforce yourself. So I was not there. Oh.
The question is, could somebody please comment on the state of tourism in Africa, opportunities and challenges? And that comes from Karthik, who is director of the School of Hospitality Business.
So I think I will answer it from the South African perspective, and I'll sort of concluding on the challenges and talk about it.
Okay. That sounds marvelous.
All right, perfect. So I agree with my colleagues. I think they explained the challenges very well. So I'll just be reflecting on some of the challenges that entrepreneurs they encounter when they do their business activities. So one of the issues is around supporting women in business, which is something that our governments are trying to change the narrative that a woman is a nurturer, a woman must take care of the household. So we're seeing a lot of programs that are coming up to support women in entrepreneurship. But although there is that support, there is more that can be done to make sure that when they operate in industries that are male dominated, they have the support. So this is one of the areas as a woman entrepreneur wanting to venture into entrepreneurial activities in Africa. So you will have to encounter these challenges, especially women in technology, women in green energy space, women in manufacturing, women in mining. So all of those industries, which are very important in contributing to economic growth, are mostly male dominated, and there's more support for women. And I'd like to share about M-Pesa and how the innovations that we have in Africa, they changed the international business. So we did a case study on Uber. As we know, Uber internationalized to various countries. So when they started off, they were using credit cards. But when they came to Africa, so they realized that situations were different. So South Africa, because of its developed financial industry, so credit cards are a norm to a lot of people. But when they ventured into Kenya, trying to understand the Kenyan market, they realized that there are no credit cards and they use M-Pesa. So that's where Uber innovated. So they introduced M-Pesa to pay your Uber with M-Pesa and have cash payments, which have now been scaled to all the Uber, subsidiaries in different countries. And we see that through the challenges that are experienced in Africa, so a lot of multinationals are exploiting those challenges to grow their businesses, but issues around financing. What we see is that although there are these challenges, we are using novel ways to solve the challenges. So Africa is so big on saving groups where, a group of us can come together and save money. At the end of the year, we distribute whatever that we saved. So what we see changing is the notion of crowdfunding, but from the savings groups, to solve these challenges. So although there are so many challenges, but we see the resilience of youth entrepreneurs and coming up with the solutions. And the last one, which is very important, is the lack of integration between the different players within the ecosystem, which end up duplicating the efforts. So the notion of data, we're not able to see which department does what, the private sector, what is it that they're contributing. So instead of us bringing all the efforts together, we end to progress, we end up duplicating all those efforts. So I'll just stop here. In terms of tourism, I think COVID-19 has had a significant impact on tourism. But what I've seen in our country is that, we're starting to recover from COVID-19. And of course, people are interested to see the wild game. They want to see the big five. I think a lot of people outside of Africa, when they come to Africa, they realize, oh, actually, they don't have lions in their backyards. So the lions are in the game park. So I think the wildlife is one of the areas that, increase our hospitality industry and tourism industry. And we're seeing in South Africa, Cape Town, which is absolutely stunning with the wine farms. It attracts a lot of tourism and hospitality. And around Joburg, it is really the New York of South Africa, and where people get to experience and enhance development in Africa. So in terms of tourism, I think we have a lot to offer. Kenya also has a lot to offer. Nigeria. So you go to countries in sub-Saharan Africa, there's absolutely something unique to talk about. Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, absolutely stunning. And when you go to Namibia, that is when the desert meets the ocean. So things that you cannot experience in other places.
Perfect. Would you like to follow up at all?
Certainly. I want to mention that, there's this analogy, right? Africa is like a young child growing. So there's a lot of change that is happening. Unlike, say, the developed world that is an adult, where the growth rate is much smaller, right? So there's this huge appetite now for integration, economic integration. And very recently, I think as recent as last year, Africa countries have now come together and established the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, so that there's a common market of about $3.7 trillion. So in the past, where countries have done trade just within, and there's been very little trade between countries, this African continental free trade now really opens up a common market and is deemed to be the largest free trade market in the world once it's all established. So this is also another attraction really for establishing business in any country in Africa where you have access to this huge free trade zone that your goods and services can be delivered. So this was a very welcome news for African business to have this common free trade zone. The second welcome news recently has been integrating the regulatory regimes across countries for pharmaceutical products. So in the past, every country will have their own regulatory system that may be different from the other. So if you want to register, say, a product in Kenya, Kenya would have its own requirements. And if you want to go to Ghana, you have to comply with the requirements of Ghana. Well, now they have harmonized those requirements so that one dossier or one document that you submit that goes to Kenya is applicable to all the other countries. So this is another welcome news. So you can start to see that there's a lot of appetite for integration and for working as one. And this has been lacking in Africa for a long time. With this happening now, it's really going to change the dynamics of trade within the continent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've had a marvelous opportunity to talk about opportunities and challenges, and that leads us to our next question. How does one succeed as a business person in Africa? I don't know, Patrick, would you be willing to continue and take a stab at that question?
Sure. Yeah, certainly. So I think one of my colleagues mentioned soft skills, right? When I got here, I quickly learned that interpersonal relationship is extremely important in business. Folks want to feel that you respect them in the business community. They want to feel valued, and they want that personal, professional relationship at work. I'll give you an instance. There was a contract that we had applied for to support the Ghana Cocoa Board company to supply them equipment so that they can use in their laboratory. And most of the work was done online. So you have to fill the form and email them, etc. So obviously, we being more IT and digitally minded, completed all those forms and just emailed them to the organization that was managing the bidding process. Well, it turns out that what the manager actually wanted us to do was to print out the forms, sign them, and actually carry it to him and sit down and talk about the application. What that taught me was it's not enough to be at a distance when you do business here. You have to be with the folks, be present, physically present, so that they can get to assess and evaluate you rather than staying behind your computer screen and thinking that you have done all that is necessary to obtain that contract. So I quickly learned that relationships matter a lot. Yes, the technical skills are important, but people have to feel that you value them. They have to feel that there's a sense of respect for them to accept you and accept your business readily. So soft skill is extremely important when it comes to doing business and being successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, maybe I can just add a little bit of that before I go to my fellow colleagues. And this was I was saying in terms of letting people feel like you're part of them. It's something that I've seen even in bigger brands coming to Africa. So I've noticed Africa tends to have be really brand loyal. You can feel like, you know, this is part of us. And I've tried to do a case study where I compare, you know, companies, you know, born and brought up in Africa, and then brands coming from outside, and I realize it doesn't matter where you're coming from, as long as there's a way people feel like you identify with them and you make a brand look like it's, you know, it's part of them, it gets there, and you really, you know, recognize and appreciate the diversity of, you know, the community as a whole. Because which again can be really tough to do, especially if you're a big company, let's say like Microsoft or Google, and trying to expand to Africa. And it's challenging, but look at, for example, Google, what they're doing in Nairobi. So they come there, I mean, they have expertise here, people more skilled probably than a number of tech people in Nairobi, because when they came there, they, you know, started by opening a training center where they, you know, offering, you know, free trainings to people. I mean, they're trying to people, are not coming here, you know, to dump the expertise. We are coming here to go with you. So even if you're big elsewhere, we are doing this here. We're willing to learn and appreciate you and, you know, be part of the system. And a lot of people are actually appreciating they're just starting off. A lot of people appreciate it. I've seen people shifting from big companies like Safaricom to work with smaller branches like Google and Microsoft in Nairobi. So it is a matter of knowing and understanding that these people are brand loyal and they feel like we own this entity, well, they're going to support it.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that it talks about what I'm classifying as the intelligence that you need to have as a leader, as an entrepreneur, or as a manager thinking about working in Africa. So understanding the context really matters the most. You need to understand what are those social norms that people abide by. So describing how everyone wants to be respected and how they want to be treated well. So that is influenced by the social norms within the cultural groups that are there. And I mean, a lot of times Africa is considered as one country. And that is not the case. There's so many countries. And even within a particular country where I come from, you know, we have multiple tribes, many tribes that wants to be treated differently. You go to Nigeria, in one stage, you think that you got it and you understand how they behave. And when you get to another state, you realize that things are really different. So it's really the cultural intelligence, trying to understand how people behave. And you can only know that if you go and be embedded in the country and establish a branch, you know, in Nairobi, and hire the locals to help you understand them better, right? So when you have this training programs, it's also part of understanding how people behave before you fully launch on the venture. So think about emotional intelligence, which is absolutely critical. So we conducted a study, and in our conversations with managers, they spoke about the macro environmental factors that are stressors to employees. Normally, when we think about employee stress, we think about something that happens within the organization because of their job design, because of the relationship with the colleagues. But in our context, it's a bit different because there are macroeconomic factors that influence, you know, how people behave. The fact that a lot of people are not employed, the poverty level in some areas is very high. So you find that your employees carry this burden from home and you bring them into the workplace. So as a manager, now you need to, you know, or an entrepreneur, you need to put yourself in the shoes and try to understand it from that perspective. And we also touched on the contextual nuances within these different countries that people want to venture in. And another element is the kind of leadership that we require. So I think in Africa, we're realizing that there's so many leadership challenges. But as a leader, I think we emerging a new, group of leaders who will be ethical, who will be responsible, because there's so much that the continent can offer, but we don't have good leadership skills. So we challenge people wanting to venture in Africa to really possess the attributes of transformational leaders, that you will transform the lives of people that you are leading. And another element as part of the soft skills, problem solving skills, because there are wicked problems that sometimes we experience on the continent, and they really need people with good problem solving skills, and not relying on yourself, but also relying on the people around you to make those decisions. The notion of resilience, it's very important, because you will get stuck in traffic, and electricity is not there. Those are just typical examples, but because the environment is sometimes volatile, is dynamic, unpredictable, uncertain, so you really need to be a resilient leader and bounce back when there is failure and ability to adapt. And I think COVID-19 taught almost every organization worldwide the importance of adapting. So when COVID hit us, we already knew some of the strategies that we used, because think about firms in Zimbabwe, which is an uncertain market, things constantly or rapidly change. So firms there, they built resilience, and when COVID came, so some of the firms already knew, the practices, that they used to survive through the hardships. Thank you.
So it looks like there was a follow-up on tourism question in the chat. And also there's another question on somebody who's starting a business in South Africa, which I will let Anastacia answer. I was just going to follow up a little bit on that question on tourism. So tourism has been traditionally the emphasis of many governments in South Africa, because it was a big source of revenues, attracting foreigners to come and visit Africa and spend their money. And so there has been, almost in every country of Africa, there are wildlife parks that exist. Kenya, I believe, is pretty known about safaris, South Africa as well. The biggest challenge is, of course, as a private business person, you're going to be competing with government or run enterprises. And sometimes the competition is not going to be fair. And so that's where you need to be there and know how business is being done and what is your point of entry to get into the business. Your advantage as somebody who's coming from outside is the knowledge of, because all of them are targeting the outsiders, the foreigners, the tourists that are coming from Western Europe and today now from Eastern Asia. As income increases in those parts of the world, just like here. If you're going to the Grand Canyon, you're going to see many tourists from Japan, and same thing as in Africa. So you have that advantage of having that information and contacts that you can use to actually do a competition, right? But of course, you have to compete with the governments and deal with that. I think maybe that's the one thing that I wanted to emphasize. You talk about the so it's somebody who's starting a business in South Africa and wants to know what is the nearest port considered in a free trade zone.
That would be Durban. Yes, that would be in KZN, Durban. Yeah. And can I just talk about the last skill, which is important? networking. I know Dr. Berg spoke about it a bit, but I just want to emphasize the significance of networking. So when we conducted this research and interviewed CEOs who have ventured into other African countries and trying to understand what are the experiences of CEOs operating in other African countries. So what they spoke about was networking to the team. So this is about being physically present. If government invites you to attend a meeting, you need to be there. Whether it's 10 meetings per day, you need to attend those meetings because they value networking. And when you network, it actually breaks some of the barriers of entry into the markets that you want to venture in. And it also establishes some level of trust, because in Africa, we also value trust a lot. We want to know if we can trust you. And we don't trust you based on, our first interaction. We want you, to walk the journey with us. So to some people, this process might be a bit discouraging, but that is what gets you the results. And even in literature, they talk about areas where institutions are not strong, people rely on informal networks. And informal networks, being someone inviting you to attend their child's party, then you go. If being, going to attend a seminar organized by government, then you go. A community leader invites you to come and see the project that they have, then you need to go. And all of this network points that you have will guarantee success in the long term.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just add briefly to that we talked about soft skills, which are helpful for business. One other consideration is flexibility and tolerance. There have been many situations where I'll be invited to meet a client, for example, and you go there, you had an appointment on the calendar and the client never shows up. This is very common. You have to relax, because I had some American colleagues who said, I can't believe that. I can't believe that we had a meeting organized at 2 o'clock and this guy did not show up. This happens, and you just have to be tolerant and flexible. And when other things come up, people they may ignore you and go where they needed to go. They deemed that was more important than your meeting. So being flexible, being tolerant of the situations that you find yourself in, it's really important. It makes you relax, calm down, and don't expect that what you are used to, in the West is exactly what you're going to find on the continent. So I had to learn to be very flexible, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. I am so challenged by everything that I've heard tonight, and I realize there is so much more to learn. But one question I wanted to close with was, given the opportunities and the challenges in this space, do you see an opportunity or a role for the Broad College of Business? And what would your recommendations be to us for our involvement?
Well, I think before I answer that question, I think there's one point that we did talk about this morning when we were discussing that I don't want to leave out. Since we are addressing the U.S. audience, the U.S. has embassies in almost every country of Africa. And most of the time they have people whose job is really to promote American businesses. So collect data and give that data to any interested business that wants to do business in Africa. And so as an American, I think getting that contact within the embassy, our embassies, wherever you want to go as a business person, is a good thing to do. Now, just start off with how the current business can be involved. Just like any other department here in MSU is trying to do, is we are realizing that really we haven't really paid attention to Africa that much. And so every department is trying to go and recruit, not just here at MSU, but across the United States. I was in a group of people, the HBCUs that are trying to actually have a delegation that is going to go to Africa in different universities that actually recruit instructors to come and actually team with people here to teach different subjects. So Africa has been kind of left out in terms of recruiting undergrads and graduate students. We are starting in economics, really going out and every year there's somebody who recruits graduate students, PhD students to come to MSU. And it's now that we're really starting to go to African countries and try to recruit Africans. But the corridor business here has an opportunity because the African Alliance program, right, AAP, has a program where it invites young entrepreneurs and especially women for a short time here to stay here and get some soft skills and core skills in business and running a business. And that's where I think the corridor business can really be involved by collaborating with AAP and not only being that institution that gives, because that's your business, is to give those core skills of running a business, soft skills of running a business. That's what you're teaching. Most of these entrepreneurs that are coming here through AAP are people who just have that inner skills of entrepreneurship, but who need, you can't just run a business because you have that risk taking behavior. You need to also know how to read, the sheets of the business, the liability and assets and all that stuff. And that's the thing that the business can do. And not only when they are here, but you can also put up a system where you follow them up when they go back to Africa. Those are the people that could be the partners, because if you have a partner as a business person in Africa, then you don't have that problem of starting over with networking and knowing the culture. That you have somebody who's partnering with you, who knows that who can actually do the things right there. And so the kind of business can actually really continue to do that and to get the thing not stop when they live here. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add on that a little bit, just one or two points, and it's a really good question. And I'll speak as someone who has been involved with growth for the last almost 5 years, and I would say it's it's like taking in finance would say a whole option. I mean, this is Africa, I'm taking Africa, like, let's say we are venture capitalists and this is a small startup that is coming up. There is always, when a company grows, sometimes it becomes a little bit hard to get in, but for people that, going when the stock was worth $5, when it's worth $50, they reap the benefits, and I think it's the same thing now with the business college here, because you can only imagine in the next 10 years or so when everyone else is rushing and now they're like, oh, when everyone is rushing, they are trying to position themselves. Maybe they go from those days to a position where we know how we have these students, we, cannot be away or bring them here. I know they are resident in the African continent. For example, let's talk about the MS accounting or MS finance here in Prof. If I walk in, I might be surprised that either me or people might be from Africa, and that might be the case for the next 3 years. But there are opportunities where, Prof can go try to partner with a few organizations, for example, Nairobi, Rwanda, Ghana, Nigeria, and trying to see how can we facilitate these students to come here. I mean, it's a 1 year master's program, 2 years master's program, because this is someone that has graduated there. And what this does is that if this person is done and goes there, you'll create an ambassador that in the next 10 years, the name will never go out on the resume. And it's stuck there forever. It doesn't matter where it goes. So you can imagine the ripple effect it is going to have in the future. And I've realized a lot of colleges have been there. In 2016, when I was doing research about application in the US, I went to this conference where there were over 40 schools from the US, over 40 colleges in Nairobi, and they were trying to, educate people there, showing them, hey, we exist. And I would say one of the reasons why Africa is left out because of funding, right? Because our middle class is not, up there, and some of them, push students here and probably relying on schools that offer funding for them to come and, get engaged. So I saw 40 schools, and some of them, luckily, the same year MSU came, but it was later. I think before I came to know about MSU, these people like Prof and the rest, people came, but I would never have known about MSU if I never saw such a person here trying to tell people, hey, we exist. We have these platforms where you can come and assist you to get through your education or whatever programs that your college is going to come up with. And trust me, the next few years, this is going to be a great opportunity. Again, people which are call option or venture capitalists that get into a company where it goes big. By the time I get there, you're very, all invested.
Absolutely. And so the Alliance for African Partnerships has signed memorandum of understanding with multiple universities, and those universities, they really have good business schools. So I think that from a strategic point of view, you can look at what we are doing in the business schools and intentionally partner from the business school perspective. And I know that our institution in Johannesburg, Gordon Institute of Business Science, which is part of the University of Pretoria. And in fact, our Vice Chancellor is the chairman of the AAP, right? Yes. And from that perspective, I think that business schools can partner at that level. So what we are doing in Africa is to partner with various business schools, for example, Lagos Business School, so that we have signed a memorandum of understanding with. So I think that it is an absolutely wonderful opportunity because the partnership is already there and established. And in terms of some of the practical things is when you have seminars, invite, faculty from Africa who have conducted research on various topics just to present in the faculty seminar. If people are having classes, to invite faculty to do guest lecturing. Back in the days, we used to think about traveling to the States to do guest lecturing, but now with Zoom, with online platforms that could be easily facilitated. And think about the curriculum that has been prescribed to the student. If there is any course on international business and is still focusing on American startups, the curriculum committee need to question and say, why are we talking about an American startup where there are wonderful case studies about exciting startups in Africa? So I think even from the content perspective, especially courses that have to deal with entrepreneurship, international business, as an opportunity to use published case studies. So our institution is very strong in terms of telling the African stories and really publish good case studies. When we look at Ivy, which publishes, international case studies, our case studies are also up there. and also think about the exchange programs for faculty. So I think this has been a wonderful experience for me as, you know, part of the exchange program sponsored by the AAP. So my university was so excited because we normally don't have things like this. So I think, you know, inviting faculty over here, even if it's not for the whole year, just for a month, for them to learn and get a different experience. So I think that those are some of the practical things. And today might not look that encouraging, but I just want us to continue with the wonderful work that we have started today, and take this as a pioneering, you know, of the relationship we're going to establish with African institutions. So this must continue.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe I can add one more thing on what she said in terms of partnerships, because sometimes it doesn't have to be all, you know, through education, and, you know, bringing students here. It's something I've seen over the years that have been going on, and it's things like they have an Africa Business Conference, the World Africa Business Conference. When those conferences started, actually they didn't, you know, just normal conferences, like, you know, a conference between people here, partnering with a number of organizations, you know, moderators, and, you know, market conference in the African continent. The African kids come here, students or young entrepreneurs come here, have conversations about the continent of Africa, learn about the MSU, learn about Prof. At the end of the day, even if the conference has, let's say, 30, 40 people, these are people who are sending out there with a message that, oh, goodness, and that abroad, it's a great place to be, we get fun there. I mean, today, as we speak, on the other Africa Business Conference, which actually was not started by the school, but by actually it has become a big thing. And the last two conferences have been giving like some money from there to them to pay standing somebody get what, like 10,000, 5,000. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but someone coming from Africa and they have this idea, they decided to even share with the other new kids coming from Africa. They just, you know, went to the US, they came here. Some of them do not have that opportunity to interact with, like someone from South Africa interacting with someone from Zambia, someone from Mozambique, someone from Mauritania or Algeria. So that we're bringing them into the opportunity here, as well as exposing them, you know, to the different resources, the different perspective of things from the American side of the story. So this is something that can be very easy to do, and before you know it, you have great investment out there that can speak of the good things that are seen around here.
Thank you so much. The panel has been a huge gift to everyone who has been able to listen. I know I am so grateful for your willingness to share your wisdom and your insights, and to just so freely give that tonight. And I also believe that this is the first step in our journey. And I'd love us all to get together and talk about what a next step would be like. And I, quite frankly, would like to see this exact panel happening next semester, while Anna and Pius are still in the US, and perhaps Patrick would be willing to join us again also. And in the meantime, those of us in the business school can regroup a little bit and think about more effective mechanisms for marketing the program. You know, what we learned tonight was the approaches we took to marketing didn't get the word out to enough people, but we can work on that. And I want to thank again, just let me close again by thanking each of you. I've learned so much, and I look forward to learning more. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting us.